How's everybody doing? Okay, who was here for Mike Rothfeld's leadership lecture? Okay, and Mr. Rothfeld talked about 3 components of leadership. Number 1 is what? Plan. I'm sorry, I can't hear that well. Number 1 is what? Plan. Number 2? Prepare. And number 3? Act. And if anyone was paying attention, which component of leadership did Mike say we were weakest on? What's that? Preparing. Preparing. Okay, preparation. And I would put it to you that within preparation, the number 1 thing we fail to prepare is leaders. Okay, is developing sub-leaders. We fail to prepare leaders for battle, and it ends up hurting us across the country. It's already hurt us in a number of states because leaders don't understand one key thing, and that is that you must replace yourself. As soon as you're heading up a local group or an organization, you walk out of today and you're like, man, Ted, I want to start a conspiracy in my local area. As soon as you get rolling, you need to be working on replacing yourself. Some of us get pulled into this vain idea that it's all about us. The group, Ted, this group depends on me. If I weren't here, everything would collapse, right? Some of us might feel condemned, but if you feel condemned, know that I've made all these mistakes a million times more than you have. But some of us have that feeling in us. We don't want to admit it, but we have that, and we feel that if someday we weren't involved in the organization, or if the organization didn't continue to be dependent on us, we would lose some self-worth, right? A real leader is someone that develops leaders around them so that if that leader goes down, if that leader's gone, that organization doesn't miss a beat. It's as if that leader was never even there. That group doesn't miss a beat. They keep on going because real leaders know it's not about them. It's about something far bigger and something that's going to last a lot longer than they will. What I've been asked to talk about today is a GOP party battle that occurred in Maryland. And it's particularly important for us to talk about because throughout the country we've had success building the liberty movement in different states. And we've been building off of 3 legs of the stool, which is something that we train people, something Dave Pridgeon coined, and it's kind of the three aspects of your organization in your state. One aspect is your local level organization, your grassroots organization. Another aspect is state level organization. A third aspect is party level involvement and organization. And in a number of states, there's been progress building all 3 stools. And in some states, it's been one-dimensional. And in some states, there's only been effort made on working through the party and not growing other levels of organization. And that's a major problem. And we've seen some of our guys, our best guys, get thrown out on their butts out of the parties, and we have nothing there to back those guys out, nothing there to hold those guys accountable. And where do we stand? We stand starting from square one. So you have to understand when we talk about the 3 legs of the stool that everything depends on local level grassroots organization, establishing that. And from that, then you have opportunities to take shots at the state level. You have opportunities to do things that Talbot Black's done. You have opportunities then to get involved in the party. So please understand those 3 components when you think about your own state. And so the story I'm going to tell you today is about House Bill HB 1513 in Maryland and how because we had different levels of organization in place, we were able to beat the establishment. As I said, we've been making progress in many areas, but people fail to realize that in many of the areas we've been making progress, it's been because we've been kind of surprise attacking them, right? Ron Paul people will storm into a GOP meeting, storm into GOP elections where the establishment basically didn't take us seriously. They didn't think we were going to make any progress, and we make incredible gains because we weren't up against the full force of the GOP establishment or the left. I repeat myself. But once you're organized, once you're established, once you show that you are serious, that you are inflicting pain on the establishment and that you're not going away, the empire will strike back. They will throw the kitchen sink back at you to take you out. And so House Bill 1513 was just that for us in Maryland. In Maryland, we've been making a lot of progress taking positions within the Republican Party. Okay, liberty activists in Maryland are interested in creating the Republican Party as something that people can be energized behind, not something that people apologize for. Right? Yeah, you know. It was so interesting in the last election cycle, you'd go up to someone, you'd ask them, hey, who you supporting for the election? And they, Romney. What? I didn't hear you. Who are you supporting? Romney. You know, and as soon as you start talking to them, they're apologizing and sort of tearing up a little bit because they're so dejected and demoralized. And, so we don't want that. That's ridiculous. We're not going to settle for that. So we've been gaining positions over time in the party. Folks in Maryland have been picking up proxy seats in GOP conventions, picking up Central Committee seats. And it's been building up over time. We started in 2009 as a bunch of village idiots. And by implementing the one-day school training and learning from people like Mr. Rothfeld and others, we were getting better and better. And by this election season, in the GOP primary, liberty activists, it came out to a little bit over 100 candidates statewide who filed to run for office, whether it was Central Committee or County Council or State Delegate, but most of the people were focused at the local level. Tidal wave of people stepping up to get involved. So the Friday after the filing deadline, when the establishment was able to take a look at the scorecard for who's filed to run for office, a bill was dropped, HB 1513. And it was a coincidence. I'm sure they didn't plan it this way, but it was dropped right at the end of a Friday, right before a mammoth snowstorm was about to smash into Maryland. That was probably just a coincidence they did that. And so what did the bill do? The bill was threefold. Number one, they wanted to add all state legislators to the Central Committee. And this bill was geared toward one of perhaps our strongest counties in the state of Maryland. It was geared toward one GOP Central Committee because on that GOP Central Committee, it was evenly divided between liberty activists and establishment hacks, okay? They put this bill in to add all of the GOP legislators from the county, add them to that committee, thereby giving the establishment authority to knock all of our guys off the committee. Now, now remember, guys, the legislators who were going to be added to the committee, they didn't get any voting rights except to take somebody off the committee, which we all know that doesn't matter. That's just, that's not a big deal, right? So that was one piece of it. Number two, the bill prohibited anyone who served on the GOP Central Committee from running for, or not running for, but from holding another office. Except, of course, if you were a state legislator, okay? You might see a trend here. So a lot of candidates in Maryland, many who were defenders of liberty, filed for two offices, for Central Committee and for another office, you're listed twice on the ballot. It's going to help you a little bit more to get elected, being listed on the ballot like that. And they wanted to stop that too. And then number 3, which was beautiful, was they made this emergency legislation. In the bill, it said this bill is vital to the public health. It must be enacted as soon as it's passed. Emergency legislation. This is what it was. And we knew going into this fight that if these guys were successful in passing this bill, they were going to take this across the state. They felt that they could sneak this in, they could purge guys off the Central Committee, and wipe the liberty activists out of the party. So, did we cower? Did we hide under our desk, get in the fetal position, and suck our thumbs and give up? No. We went on offense against these guys. There are 2 things you do when the establishment starts coming after you and whining and complaining and taking offense to what you're doing. Number 1, you're to rejoice. And you're to say, thank you, Lord, I'm doing something effective. I'm ticking them off. They wouldn't be responding and doing these things if I weren't being effective. And number 2, you must have 2 words front and center in your mind all the time. And they are double down. Okay? Double down on them. So, we had a Campaign for Liberty group. Not just in the state of Maryland, not just at the state level, but we had the State Maryland Campaign for Liberty and a number of local Campaign for Liberty groups. All of these groups started working their lists, okay? Sending emails, putting pressure on their local legislators, mobilizing angry voters to call into their GOP legislators saying, what the heck are you thinking with this bill? Okay, it was full rebellion within the Republican Party in Maryland, and we have a lot of strength in areas of Maryland that are conservative. So we were really pushing our troops out. They were putting out emails, and we were sending out robocalls. How dirty is that? So mean. Calling the politician on their personal phone line. And if you're not aware of this yet, if a politician lists their personal phone line, their cell phone number, their office line, that means that they want you to contact them at all 3 of those lines. That's what it means. That's what they're telling you. We're just listening to what they're communicating to us. So we robocalled the heck out of them, and then we did something that really made them very upset. We mailed the bill sponsors donors in their districts. And we let their donors know exactly the type of ridiculous crap they were involved in. Because it was one thing that the bill was just totally ridiculous and made no sense and would have been detrimental to our liberty movement. But number 2, it was trivial. It was a blatant political attack. And we were able to expose that to their donors. And, I mean, really ticked off these guys were. I mean, just exploding on us. And it turned out that we were able to kill the bill. It didn't even move in committee. It went absolutely nowhere because we were able to mobilize our activists and fight. And one thing I'll add is that we mobilized through Campaign for Liberty, Maryland Campaign for Liberty, and a number of local C4L groups that we had that local grassroots organization established. But we also had some other groups that were being run by other like-minded activists. We have a group in Maryland called the Maryland Pro-Life Alliance. What do you think this group was messaging to their people? Well, the GOP is declaring war on pro-life activists and trying to purge pro-life activists out of the party. So we mobilized those people, and there was another like-minded group called the Maryland Liberty PAC. They worked their list, and they started driving in phone calls and emails into the politicians. So the foundation of all this stuff starts at the local level. It starts by building sub-leaders around yourself so that you can get things done at the local level. Then you have the capability to try to emulate some of the things that people like Sean Dow and Tony DeMont, Talbert Black have been doing at the state level, okay? And then you can have the opportunity at times to put together different groups to provide yourself with multiple fronts to hit the liberals on in both parties, okay? That can be very, very useful to you. And you know, all this in this fight depended on 3 things. Okay, the three components of leadership, which number one is what? Planning. Number two is what? Prepare. And number three? Act. Right? So planning was done on the front end, right? We had been putting this in motion for years, building local level organization. We had a game plan for building local groups, what the timeline was for doing that. Okay? We were preparing, we were list building the whole time. The only way that you mobilize angry voters is by having a list to mobilize from. So we would table events and run petitions 24/7 to put politicians under pressure, but to also build our ranks. So the victory we had on this bill could not have come if we hadn't been doing this stuff and putting this infrastructure in place. So by planning and preparing, we put ourselves in a position where we could quickly act. I told you this bill was dropped in the middle of session on a Friday evening right before a major snowstorm, and we had to act quickly. Their game plan was to skirt this through as quickly as possible to totally derail the efforts of liberty activists in the election season. That was the game plan. But we were tipped off by it, and we were able to turn around our forces just like that to respond.